Bad news if you are an Amy Schumer fan like myself. Her show Inside Amy Schumer will actually not be returning for a 5th season. She's instead taking time to focus on her stand-up and her book, The Girl with the Lower Back Tattoo. Now, this comes after Schumer was in the news following controversy of a former writer on her show, Kurt Metzger, who caught a lot of flack for his remarks regarding rape when he was defending fellow comic Aaron Glazier. And we're going to throw up a picture, and I'm going to read some highlights from that Facebook post. He said, quote, in this post, "Jeff Dilfeberg is a rapist. I know because all women said it, and that's all I need." He goes on to say, anyway, Jeff Dilfeberg is dangerous, so fucking dangerous that we can't go to the police to report his many rapes. That would be too rapey, and the women are too brave for that. If we ask them to even merely also post a vague account of what happened before asking us to believe, that would be like re-raping their rape. So, of course, Amy Schumer was tweeted at by a lot of people asking how she felt about these comments. She responded on Twitter. She said, "I am so saddened and disappointed in Kurt Metzger. He is my friend and a great writer, and I couldn't be more against his recent actions." She goes on, "Kurt does not work for me. He is not a writer on my show. Please stop asking me about it. His words are not mine." And, you know, she actually started blocking people who would continue to tweet to her about Kurt Metzger. She really didn't want to deal with it. But then she said in another tweet, "I didn't fire Kurt. He isn't a writer for my show because we aren't making the show anymore. There are no writers for it." Now, guys, we announced that we were going to be covering this story, and Amy Schumer actually tweeted at TYT Live, and she said that she wanted us basically to read the remarks that she said on Charlie Rose this past Thursday, so I'm going to read those out to make sure that we get her side of the story. On Charlie Rose, she said, "I think it's great that people are stepping forward, and if it's not done in a way that Kurt feels right, you know, that's really upsetting to hear. We all need to be empowering each other, but to focus your energy on online trolling, if I did that, I wouldn't get anything done. Let's focus on getting the actual problem done." So basically what she's saying is she wants to focus on the real problem, which is rape, rather than the trolling and sort of the witch hunt. But she does say that he is the problem, no question, but the focus is on him rather than what we really need to be talking about. Before we get back to you guys, I just want to say that Kurt did respond following all this backlash. His name has been really, really in the news, which is unlike typical for him. He said, "I am dumb to not realize this mob would lie and say I was yelling at rape victims," he told Mike. He went on to say, "But I do care if a rape victim thinks I was mocking them, and I care if an innocent guy gets charged. The way I spoke fucked both of those things." Then he went on to say, "Isn't it ironic that there is more heat on me than the rape suspect?" He said, "Doesn't that tell you that I'm right?" So a lot to unpack here. I want to get your thoughts. Jimmy, especially, you are a comic. You're in the comedy community. What do you think about this?
You know, I don't know. I don't know. You know, I did my show at the UCB Theater here in LA for many years when they first opened. And, you know, I don't know how you police something like that. I don't know these people. So I don't want to say. All I know is that I kind of feel sorry for Amy Schumer in a sense, because now she's got to take flack for people who work for her. Comedians who write are, you know, notoriously live a complicated life, you know, nightclub performers, things like that. So there's lots of things. So, but then again, you have to, this comedy club, the UC, they have to protect the people who perform there, and they've got, so what Kurt is saying, it's like, hey, why do you want to, if this really, I think what he's saying is that if this really happened, why, instead of getting together and coming at me, why don't you get together and go to the police and arrest this guy and get him in jail? Because now you're just kind of smearing him without actually proving the allegation. I think that's a legitimate point to make. But at the same time, I know again, it's a messy all the way around. The way he did handle it wasn't the right way. So
yeah. So let me jump in. I think that there's a couple of different issues here. And so first on Kurt, it's a little ironic when he says, well, that proves that I'm right because you guys aren't going after the rape suspect. Well, your whole point was to not go after him, right? You started all this for defending that guy who's your friend. Now you're saying, hey, why don't you go after the rape suspect? I know why he's saying it. He's like, if it's so serious, why don't you go after him? Doesn't that prove that I'm right? No, it doesn't prove that you're right. It's, you know, so people can think, hey, what he did was terrible, and what you did, like kind of making fun of it or making light of it, is also terrible. That doesn't really prove anything. So I agree with Jimmy, though, that it's not clear cut, and my people might get mad at that. So when Kurt goes and says, look, some people were mad at this quote, all women are as reliable as my Bible. a book that, much like women, is incapable of lying. So he's obviously kidding around, but he's doing it in a way that people feel like is smearing all women. But he's making a joke about relationships and about women and comedians. I think that's totally fair game. So I would have been super careful to make light of rape, which I don't think he was. I don't think he was anywhere near careful, right? He gets to defend his friend, and he gets to make what he thinks is a legitimate point of like, hey, you guys never proved this, right? So, and that is a legitimate point. Whether that doesn't mean that it didn't happen either, right? So that's a complicated issue. But the thing is, what he's got to realize is when he says things like, or re-raping the victim's good whole, no, don't say that. That's a really, really ugly thing to say.
Yeah.
And so I'm giving you as much leeway as I can. As a comedian, I think you get a lot more leeway. As you're defending your friend, I'll give you a little bit of leeway on that. I understand the argument you're making. I'm not immune to that argument. I get it, right? And we said, when we covered that issue, we said, hey, listen, keep in mind that there's a lot of women who are saying this, but it hasn't been proven in a court of law. That's the one way to say it. Another way to say it is like this. Kurt, if you can't see why people would get mad at that, that's a little, you're being a little dumb about that.
But, yeah.
And I don't know the guy at all.
Well, Kurt's, I know him a bit. I've been on his show, Race Wars. I wouldn't say that he's a friend of mine, but I've met him, and I'm a UCB alum, so I know some of those people who are conducting the investigation into this alleged sexual assaulter, and I do think that. Look, Kurt's shtick is always to make sure that he is the most controversial person on Facebook or on Twitter at any given point in time, right?
Mission accomplished.
And so the manner in which he says things is intentionally confrontational. When you start delving into a subject that is as toxic and where there are as many tripwires as something like sexual assault, in the same way that if you were talking about race relations, for example, you have to be aware that if you trigger one of those tripwires, the whole world is going to blow up in your face. But I do think that it's a problem that it's impossible for a comedian to make an outrageous statement like this without potentially ruining his entire career. I mean, this probably will have consequences in terms of the clubs that want to book him. This may have consequences in terms of whether Amy Schumer wants to hire him back again if she does a 5th season of her show. Should it be the case that, a spewed out rant that is delivered insensitively about a touchy subject has the potential to ruin your life? He is making a coherent point. It's a point that I don't agree with because I think he's completely missing the context of how hard it is for victims of sexual assault to go to the police. He seems to live in this fantasy world where the police are really good at following up on those things, and rape kits are constantly getting tested, and the way in which we combat sexual assault from the perspective of law enforcement is abysmal and needs to be improved. But I can understand his point. Like he wrote a follow-up post the day before yesterday in which he basically apologized for the way in which he said this. But he did say he is opposed to women who tell other women that they shouldn't go to the police. He was like, he tweeted, who the fuck does UCB think they are? Are they the Catholic Church that they're conducting an internal investigation? If it's this bad, and I'll take issue with what you just said, Cenk, about him being sort of a hypocrite for saying that his point was that the person shouldn't be prosecuted. His point is either the person is the worst person in the world and should be prosecuted and locked up in jail, or let's not conduct a whispering campaign that says, this guy is a rapist, and then ruin his life. Right? Let's either take it seriously or not seriously. But let's not have an internal investigation in a comedy club that could potentially ruin someone's life.
And I think we can all agree that this joke that started this whole thing was in poor taste. It's very sarcastic. And the really unfortunate thing here is that now Amy Schumer is kind of dragged into it because of their connection. And he even pointed out that he's a writer on her show for, 3 months of the year?
Yeah, it's not fair for her to be involved in any way. She shouldn't have to apologize for him or have a statement about him. She shouldn't even be asked about him.
I know.
They work together.
So, okay, let me jump in on that. First, real quick on Kurt. I'm not going to get to address every issue, but look, as I read the bottom of his Facebook thing, the statement that he put out originally, he's like, hey, Lady Ghostbuster, little girls, look up at us, tear. And he makes fun of progressive cattle or whatever. Sounds like a guy I wouldn't agree with. It sounds like, from my perspective, might be a dick, okay? But that's okay. You're allowed to be a dick. It's a free country. And especially if you're a comedian, again, much more leeway. But I think that he's got to recognize, what if he's wrong? Like, so he is ripping into these women. I get it, you're defending your friend. I get it, you think it didn't happen. And you're asking everybody else, like, but what if it didn't happen and you're ruining the guy's career? That's true, and that's a valid point to make. But what if it did happen? And now you're telling those rape victims, oh, tear, oh, ha, ha, maybe we should talk about it. I mean, I don't even want to repeat the thing I said earlier, right? So maybe you should have looked into that. There is a line somewhere, even for a comedian, even for a guy who makes a living trying to be out there, et cetera. And boy, I mean, if this doesn't cross the line, I don't know what does.
No, I think it crosses the line, but what happens when people cross lines in society, right? I'm a firm believer that in a boisterous, interesting, pluralistic society, you want the maximum number of opinions, and sometimes the messiness of that will cause transgressions that a lot of people find ridiculously offensive.
So
but I think that is preferable to a climate of fear and constipation where everyone is treading on eggshells because they're afraid of saying something that the mob is going to dislike.
So that's where I'm going to agree with you, Josh. So I think it crosses the line of good taste, and I wish that he would look at it and go, yeah, shoot, what if my friend is full of shit and they were raped and then I made fun of them? Oh, like I wish he would. I didn't get that sense from his so-called apology.
Yeah,
right. That was not an apology at all.
It was a non-apology.
Okay. Yeah. So what are the consequences? Look, we get to judge him. That's it, though. That's it. I don't think he's fired, right? And so a lot of people will disagree with that. And so, and I'm curious what you all think, right? And certainly it's not on Amy Schumer at all. At all.
What some asshole says that's written on her show before, it does not reflect on her as a person, what she believes. That's ridiculous that she got dragged.
So what, like, I'm responsible for everything Jimmy Dore says? Are you fucking kidding me?
I hope not.
Okay, no way. No,
you
way.
are. You are. You are. It is on your show. I'm on your network. It is on your head.
Well, then, okay, I got to fire you preemptively. Okay. So no, it's not on Amy. By the way, just to be absolutely clear, they do have a 5th season of the show. They just don't know when they're going to get back to it. It's kind of like
She's taking a break. It's
hiatus,
sort of a hiatus,
etc. And she doesn't know if they're going to rehire Kurt on every one of these seasons, which lasts only 3 months. They rehire the writers. So technically, he's not working for her right now. He might again later. Just wanted to be clear on that point. Now, for her, she gets to say exactly what she said on the show, which is, look, I like the guy. I work with the guy, and we have a great relationship. He shouldn't have said this.
Yeah.
That's it. We're done with it. As far as Amy Schumer's is concerned, that's good enough.
Yeah.
Hey, look, she said, again, sorry, Jimmy, to use you as an example. Let's say Jimmy says something outrageous. Wow, like that could happen, right? I go, hey, I love Jimmy. I work with Jimmy. That was a stupid thing to say. I'm done with it, right? So, I mean, unless he keeps saying horrible thing after horrible thing, then I go, well, okay, I don't want that on the air all the time. Like, you went a little beyond the bounds of reason. There's a point, right?
I think that's part of the problem, Cenk, is the follow-up, right? Is that Kurt will try to explain himself, and he will be equally ham-fisted in the explanation as he was in the original post. So, and this is the problem when you're a public figure with social media, as I'm sure you are aware. If the mob turns on you, the best thing to do is to understand that this stuff runs hot but fast, and it'll be over soon, and don't engage. Because his problem is partly the subsequent tweets that he's been tweeting saying, which just dig himself further into a hole. That's the problem. He doesn't know when, he's a dog with a bone and he doesn't know when to drop it.
Well, look, from what I read, and again, I don't know Kurt Metzger at all in his habits and stuff, but from what I read, he prides himself on being a troll. Like they're trolling people, or not necessarily being a troll as a profession or whatever, but like he likes trying to get a rise out of people, as you were saying on Twitter and Facebook. So, well, I mean, you play with fire, you're going to get burned at some point. So that's why he continues to step back into it, because he can't help himself.
The problem is that the people who will attack him will intentionally misrepresent, and I've seen this again and again with myself as well on social media. They will willfully misrepresent what you're saying. There is no space for nuance. It's not possible for him to say, he posted on Facebook the day before yesterday, this was part of, let me just read a line. It was never my intent to antagonize victims or their supporters. My defensiveness came from feeling deliberately misunderstood. I am not a rape apologist. Do you think that's going to stop people from calling him a rape apologist?
No,
that's exactly what a rape apologist would say, though.
That's what they'll say. But that's the thing, though. You live by the sword, die by the sword. Like he likes trolling people. Well, now he's getting trolled, and so now he's like, wait, if you do it to me, then my feelings get hurt.
But in his defense,
yeah, but that was what you did to people. So I mean, okay, then I have a little less sympathy for you.
Yeah, I suppose that's fair. But in his defense, he would say that he doesn't intentionally mischaracterize other people. He makes he finds very provocative ways of expressing opinions that are unfashionable. But he doesn't go after. But and this
But
is
that's
true
what
of him.
everybody
No,
says.
but I will say this of him to the extent that I know him, which is not very well, but I know people who do know him well, who will always say if you get into a big argument with him and you convince him that you're right, he will change his mind.
Yeah.
He's not a dogmatic a-hole.
So I don't know the guy at all, so you might be very well right about that. So in my experience, though, the guys who misrepresent other people the most will say that they never do it and that they are shocked and chagrined by it. They're like, misrepresentation is the worst thing ever, as they're misrepresenting you, right? And so maybe you're right about him, but online trolls, that's what they live and breathe, is to misrepresent people.
Well, I don't think he's a troll, because I think that's the wrong term, because I regard a troll as being someone who intentionally tries to get a rise out of people by just spewing venom. He tries to get a rise out of people by saying controversial things that challenge their orthodoxies, that make them think about things in a different way. And he says them in such a provocative way that initially they're confronting, but when you actually dig in and try to see the point that he's trying to make, he's not simply trying to get a rise, he's also trying to make a point.
And sorry, Grace, one last thing. There's a difference between, and that's good for you to point that out, between a troll and a guy who's trolling, right? So, like, if that's what he does and his whole thing is to get a rise out of people and that's the only reason he's doing it, and he doesn't care how he gets a rise out of people, whether they misrepresents them or not, that's a troll. That's what he does, right? He's just trolling from time to time in the way that you described. Right.
He's trying to make a point.
There is a distinction.
He is trying to make a point. There is some intellectual content behind his nastiness.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, you literally said what I was going to say, where I would characterize this interaction that he had in this post on Facebook as trolling. You know, maybe he's not necessarily a troll all the time, but what he did with this sort of sarcastic, Jeff Dilfeberg is a rapist, and I know that that's trolling the victims. That's trying to get a rise out of people who are saying this.
But
That's
he is
all I would
worried
say.
about an actual thing, which is the difficulty, because of the sensitivity of sexual assault, the difficulty of giving the presumption of innocence to men who are accused of it. That he is legitimately concerned about that.
But he didn't articulate that in a way that was clear.
Well, no, of course not.
Right,
That's him.
The way, right, and I think that that's what's so frustrating about it is that he did have, as we've discussed, he had some valid points. There are problems with how we go about prosecuting, victims of sexual assault and the people who are committing the assault. There's a major problem there, and we could have had that discussion. And I've heard, as a comic, actually really, very stimulating and challenging jokes about rape in America and rape culture. But this wasn't that. And I think that that's why this sucks. And this sucks for just everyone involved.
You know, your original question, Josh, was what happens when people cross lines in our culture, and nowadays they make you the GOP nominee.
Right, and I think the two factors are actually linked. I think one of the reasons why Trump has the support that he does is because people are sick and tired of feeling like they're being thought policed by politically correct people.
Yeah. So that's why I say, just to be absolutely clear, that's why I say don't fire him, because I don't want people walking on eggshells. What I want is a conversation. And so at the same time, that means Kurt can't get too upset about the conversation. You wanted to start one, well, you started it, and we're having it, right? And I don't think you should be fired. I never, in all those times when Don Imus said the nappy-headed hoe or whatever he said, I said he shouldn't be fired. Almost every time Rush Limbaugh said something crazy, I said he shouldn't be fired. Look, they're talk show hosts. They're trying to stir up a conversation. I think they're douches, but it is what it is, and we get to fight back and forth. And so, because if we fire someone every time somebody says something wrong, well, it's going to shut down all conversations. And then when you do that, you're going to accidentally shut down really important conversations.